Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm joined by Katie Storey. She's the director at Pressbox PR. How you doing, Katie?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. Yeah, it's a Friday here, wrapping up on your end. I'm just getting started on my end. Katie, I saw you speak at Brighton SEO, and you give a great chat about just like reactive PR, newsjacking, all in that vein. And I was impressed and wanted to get you on the podcast to talk about it. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Before we do, I just want to remind everybody, like and subscribe, share this stuff, give a 5-star review. The more you do that kind of stuff, the more I can have great guests on like Katie. So, Katie, let's just jump right into this. Newsjacking,
Yes.
reactive PR. These are terms I feel like are sometimes mismatched together. I'd love to get your definition of newsjacking to start.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting one. Before I moved over to PR, was a journalist. So for me, newsjacking is just very much like you breaking news, right? So I was very much used to being on desk and looking at it from a very kind of reactive position on an editorial team. But looking at it from a PR perspective, I feel like there's almost two routes to newsjacking. So it's basically capitalizing on breaking news events or key calendar moments and events throughout the year. And you have your sort of planned reactive, which can still be newsjacking, if you like, in the sense of, say, this is a very UK example, but say you've got the budget coming up. Typically, what's going to be said, typically you'd have an understanding of the likely outcomes. So you can prep any content around that you might be looking to send out to media. And then, excuse me, it's just literally a case of then tweaking it to make it relevant as and when the information drops. So there's a planned element to it, but then you've still got that kind of real time where you have to be reactive as the stories break. Then you have your breaking news reactive is how I frame it differently. And that is the stuff you can't plan for. So it literally could be, for instance, a heat wave is coming and all of a sudden this is taking over the news. It's this summer in Europe, temperatures are peaking by this point, or it could be a volcanic eruption, or it could be, look at Trump and Elon Musk, very relevant example, right? The beef that's breaking out between them. It's so how do you then jump onto that? It's very quick in the moment. And it's that kind of quick thinking where you then need to be prepped enough to be able to take advantage of those moments because they can be really beneficial. Because I think from the digital PR side, you are then making yourself accessible and very helpful to the media. So it's where you can, I think, assert yourself from the rest is how you approach that more breaking news reactive style work.
Yeah, great, thorough answer there. You touched on something too that I want to dig into a little bit more. You have a background as a journalist, and in your talk, I think you spoke about thinking like a journalist.
Yeah.
What does that mean? How can people think like a journalist?
Good question. Think as a journalist, you're always looking for the next story. So a massive one breaks and it's great. But then as a journalist, you always want to find, okay, where is this going? What's the next kind of story? What are people going to be interested in as a result of this? And you've got to remember, as much as we as digital PRs, or we're all in competition with other agencies, media desks are all in competition with each other too. They all want the traffic for certain stories. And most people consume their news online now, and it's very fast moving and fast paced. My biggest advice in terms of thinking like a journalist is, what do you think other people are going to want to read off the back of this story that's just broken? So you always want to be thinking one step ahead, if that makes sense. And that way you've got all these breakout pieces that you can then start thinking about from one story that's broken.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think to reiterate the point, like, I feel like this gets lost for some people, but the idea that journalists work at a publication, they have KPIs just like we
Yeah.
do, and theirs is traffic. So like, it's not, you shouldn't think of it as a PR as inserting your client. How can I insert my client into a story? It's how can I make a great story for this journalist? How do I present them with a great story? Because that's at the end of the day what they need to do. They're not looking to help your client.
No, absolutely. And it's a very, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. As much as you want to place your client in a story, the journalist wants to find that new angle and move a story along. So actually, if you're finding something that is a relevant hook to your client and you think actually this is a great story that we could actually position ourselves quite well here, then you can do so in a way that then gives that journalist exactly what they're looking for. And at the end of the day, the more helpful you can be and the more that you familiarize them with the work that you're doing on behalf of your client, that will stick and they'll remember that you're being helpful. And then when those breaking news stories come and they're literally on a very quick turnaround and they need something quickly, you're going to be the first person that they think of because you helped them last time around. Or what you sent over was really to the point on the money, it was newsworthy. So I think you've got to look at it as a mutually beneficial relationship. Media work in the same way we do. It's just different KPIs, it's different competitors. Ultimately, it's the same goal, right? You want to grab that audience. So yeah, it's very similar, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that idea too. You become a trusted source or trusted
Yeah.
resource for a journalist. So it's not just, again, like it's another thing that I think gets lost a lot when people treat journalists as just a target and rather than a
Mhm.
person. It's like you could easily lose out on future coverage, and you gain so much by keeping your pitches laser focused and hitting the right people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think you've got to think of it as you've got your client, but the media and the journalist is almost your client as well, in a way.
Ooh, I like that.
You
Yeah.
are the supplier, do you know what I mean, to the journalist. So
Yeah.
I think as much as you want to make it work for your client, you need to make it work for the press as well, because otherwise they're not going to use it. So if you want to convert your coverage, start seeing them just as important as your client. And how can you help them is basically what I would say is so important to hold on to. The more you can make yourself accessible and helpful to the media, then the better results you're going to have.
Yeah. I love that. And I want to come back to some of these things, but before I want to kind of power on through some of these points in your deck. You have your 5 keys to newsjacking that you talked about. And the first one, news is evolving. Let's evolve with it.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? What's changing in the news? How can we change our tactics to fit this new,
Yeah. I
paradigm?
mean, fundamentally, the news changes every day. There's always new stories that break. It is the news. So there's always this constant cycle of information, of stories that we're churning out. But then I think you've also got to look at how do we consume our news. That's evolved so much. Go back 10, 20 years ago, right? Most of the news now is either consumed online, social media, TikTok. I think like TikTok, Instagram, most people now, instead of watching the news, they consume everything through kind of news channels, if you like, or, what's being shared on social media. And I think you can't forget that, because actually, if you're evolving as news evolves and you're keeping not only on top of stories, but also how people are consuming things, then actually the content you create, you can target or package in the right way. For instance, if you've got a story and as much as you're going to press, the press might then also have a very active Snapchat channel or different means that they want to publish the news. And if it's still targeted to your SEO goals and there's still placements that work for your client, then I think it's worth thinking about all the different channels that you can potentially package up what you want to send to press, because news fundamentally now is not just one size fits all. We all consume it differently and things are changing all the time. Things that audiences loved and were driving huge traffic, they will then change. And I think when you're looking at the news, the way that stories are packaged up will change. So, how do headlines change? How do, it could be what we're seeing more and more of at the moment of first person pieces, right? So, either case study experiences or those headlines that are, I'm a medical expert and this is actually what's happening with whatever topic. Framing your content in the same way that you're now seeing news stories presented is also a great way to show media that you understand them, that you are adapting your content to suit them, and that you're basically evolving as audiences and readers evolve pretty much. So yeah, there's a couple of different approaches, but I think it's really important to just where you can be very aware of changes that you're seeing and incorporate them into your own work where you can.
Yeah, you hit on one thing here that I have heard a lot about. I never really did this or came across this in the US, and maybe this is more UK based. I've heard about it in Australia a lot, or maybe it's just evolving into this, but this need for more case studies. So having a
Yeah.
personal story along with your story that you're pitching. So the question I have about that is, if I'm thinking about a I'm a brand, I'm a plumber, or I'm a dentist or something.
Yeah.
Like, how do you pitch your brand while still providing kind of a customer story that is relevant to the story? I feel like that could be tough to do. Because to me, in my mind, sorry, just to clarify, when you're talking about a case study like that, I see how that it can be newsworthy and like something that a
Mhm.
journalist wants to talk about. But I feel like that would take over the story and your brand is not important, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the way that you package it up. So, for instance, you could create a case study using one of your brand spokespeople. So, in that example, if it is you've got a plumbing company and your founder is a plumber and has that knowledge, then you can literally package it up as I am a plumbing expert and these are the mistakes you're making that are costing your bathroom thousands. It's that first person commentary that still is relatable, it resonates, and you're putting a face to the name. You can supply a picture of the founder, and it still has that kind of relatability that you're looking for in terms of that case study content. If you were looking at external case studies that aren't a part of your brand, you position it up as you are the interviewer. So it could be that you've gone and found these case studies because it's relevant to your brand. So in that case, it might be not the founder that you're creating as the case study, but it could be, a customer that you've worked with who had a really challenging build or had a story to share that was quite newsworthy. Then it's approaching them, speaking to them. One, obviously, you need to make sure you've got that permission to send them out to media and they've got to be up for it. But if they are, then, that's a way that you can do it because you frame it as here's the story. They were interviewed by your brand. And then as media pick that up, they then need to cite obviously where that interview content has come from because you then become the source of that
Right.
information. Um, you can package it up in that way. So there's two
Hmm.
different types there. But I definitely think that we are seeing so much more of this case study content and it's working so well. I think anything that's relatable or break that fourth wall a little bit is what people like to see. And also, I think the news can be quite heavy when we're talking about just general news. Most hard hitting news is very political or is quite, it can be a lot, it can be overwhelming. So sometimes
Crime and
first
yeah.
person pieces. Yeah, exactly. Like it resonates a bit more, it lightens the load a little bit. And it's also sometimes a little bit of an escape for people to read because they're focusing on somebody else's experience. So yeah, I think I would definitely champion case study content at the moment. And if you're not doing it, it's something to think about.
Yeah, to kind of walk through this process in real time. So it's the idea that like, and correct me, make sure I'm getting this right. So it's like you're a plumber. Maybe there's a major pipe burst or something, and you want to leverage that, newsjack that. It can be like, oh, such a Vince's plumbing agency. I I know three of my customers, they just had big pipes burst. So like maybe it's happening more in the city here. I'd reach out to a journalist and be like, hey, I work at Vince's Plumbing. I just wanted to let you know, like, we also had three pipes burst in the same month in the same area, whatever. This is a way to insert your brand right into that story. Yeah, I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
100%. Yeah, exactly that. It's just you're still hooking it on that story that's just broken, but you're making it more relevant to your brand so that people that you're targeting can then see it and see the relevance, see the connection, and they see you as an expert. It just helps reinforce your credibility as well.
And do you recommend in those case studies providing the information rather than, oh, I can connect you with these three customers whose pipes burst, or here's a quote from these three customers. Oh, one said it ruined their basement. The other one said whatever.
Yeah.
Is there one way better than the other?
It's a really good question. I think, look, journalists, again, if you go back to that sort of competitive edge, right? They're always going to be looking for an exclusive opportunity. And that's where offering up the interviews is brilliant because you are giving them just that. They can do the chat themselves, they get that exclusive content, and it's something that is really valuable to them. At the same time, journalists are time poor. So if you're going to them with a case study that's fully fleshed out, you've got the quotes, you've got the headline, you've got the pictures, you've got everything they need to literally just publish, then a case for them is just they're editing it. They may come back for a few additional quotes, but again, it's presenting content in a way that is most valuable, most helpful to them. I definitely wouldn't rule out offering up the chance to give them interviews and provide the information in that way because exclusives can land really well. I think when it's time sensitive, especially if you're hooking it onto a news story that's playing out in real time, that's when they are really time poor. So then that's when it's better, I think, sometimes to have something packaged up and ready to go that you can literally give to them and it helps on their end.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right. Let's power through your, some other, these keys here. One of them was relevancy is key, specifically know when to hold back. I love this so much. I want to understand, let's keep on maybe this plumbing thing just to keep a thread. So major pipe burst. Let's talk a little bit about like how far off can you go? How far or how close do you need to be able to speak as an expert and provide expert commentary?
It's an interesting one. I always say, and clients that I work with, I always say, how they are the ones that can judge how far they're willing to attach their brand to certain commentary or to certain stories. And I think in this case, okay, if we're taking the plumbing example, for instance, if you are a makeup brand, it may not be for you, right? It's not your target audience. It's not what you're trying to drive. You don't have relevant products. I would say there's no need for you to insert yourself here because actually you probably can't. You're not offering anything useful. However, if it say it could be, it's a plumbing brand, you might not be plumbing, but you could be an interior designer. You could have something that's relevant to renovations, pipe bursting, or especially if we're looking at it from a residential point of view, that could wreak havoc with the rest of your house. If you are thinking about safety elements there, where could you go with that? So if you're an electrician, again, it's not affecting you. If it gets into the walls, it gets into the wires. You could look at it from, say, depending on what that story was, if it's a pipe burst in a big industrial park, you could look at, okay, what's the economic impact of that going to be? So are you a brand that is working closely with governmental bodies or councils, or could it be that you're to do with property? So how is that going to affect sort of property market around there if it's causing lasting damage, or you've got stagnant water and things like that? So I think it's just a case of looking at how that story can have knock-on effects and actually how far can you go with that where it still has a degree of relevance. So if there is that degree and you're comfortable with it and you can come from a place that is knowledgeable enough, I would say go for it. In the makeup case, you've got nothing really there to offer. So actually, if you did try and this is your best look that you could do amid a pipe burst, you're not going to put two and two together, are you? So you are going to end up looking silly and it's not going to get picked up. So it's just, I think, common sense in a way of can you be likened to that sort of story given the angle that you're providing? If it seems viable, then I think you've got a good shot. I always use the example of a heat wave because actually there's so many elements here. You don't, on the outset, a heat wave, it could seem that's not relevant to my brand, but say you're a coffee brand, you could easily do, hang on a second, if it's too hot and there's worries or concerns about dehydration and things like that, then it's a good explainer FAQ piece about coffee. Is coffee really going to make you dehydrated? Can you still drink it in 40-degree heat? Should you? All of a sudden, that story is all about coffee, but people pick it up because it's relevant to the context of a story that's playing out, especially if it's something like the weather that tends to play on for quite a while. So you've got multiple points in that news narrative where you can be offering up this commentary. So yeah, I think it's always a case of common sense. And if it seems too far a stretch and you're not sure, then it's too far a stretch. It's my advice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the way your kind of brain thinks through that, Katie. You were able to just come up with 5 or 6 different industries and connect them to this pipe burst or heat wave. What are some ways? So when I was at Siege Media, the agency I worked at before I moved to BuzzStream, like we train new hires all the time to do PR. What are some ways you recommend to get people that think like that to connect the dots? How can my brand connect? And we've run this internally. It's just like a game. How can we connect BuzzStream to whatever? So it just as like a super nerdy game, but like I could totally see that as an exercise that you would want to do with new hires. And remembering now, somebody I actually interviewed, I think it was Sage Singleton at ClearLink. I forget the example, but like they had an example like that they would ask on resumes, like for cover letters, or maybe it was like the interview. It was like, just to understand how people's brain worked, it was like, can you connect the dots between whatever it was, like a cat and a boat? Like, what kind of stories can we make about that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
It's an interesting one. I think, have you ever played that game? So we do it more, I guess, in sort of ideation or like creative work where like word association. So you start with a certain word and then you pass it around and you have to then do words that associate with that word and with that word. And then again, that just broadens your thinking and you'll be able to connect it in some way. And I think actually you can look at that because that's a degree of relevancy, right? So the first word is going to be ultra relevant. Then the next word might not be as relevant, but still is. And then you go further and further away from it. So if actually what's more relevant to your brand is sitting on the outside of that, then I would say too much of a stretch. But if you're in the inner runs of that, then it's probably worth a shot in terms of how you can then package something up on behalf of your brand to suit that word or that theme or whatever it might be. One thing that I would suggest is definitely the biggest thing you can do is read the news. So when stories break and, when stories are breaking, the first things that most people or most sites will do will create live blogs around it. And those live blogs, you can see the type of content that they're running in those live blogs. Live blogs need to be updated. Sometimes it's every 10, 15 minutes. There's not always going to be a solid sort of part of the story or new information that comes on in that time. They're looking for relevant things that they can then stick into those blogs to keep them going. So they can be a good kind of its source of inspiration. I think just it sounds silly, but just keeping up with the news. So just reading the news, like from as many different publications as you can, and you start to get a feel for how different places will run things and how they will publish certain stories or relevant stories to a certain news story. That's really helpful. And I think if you're coming at it from the client point of view, any sort of key themes attached to your brand, set Google alerts for, see what's coming up, the stories that are coming up for those sorts of themes and those keywords or those topics. And again, it's looking at actually in those sorts of stories, could we offer anything up here? And if you could, then I think it's a good place to start in terms of mapping out exactly what expertise you have in house that you can share out, what information, are you currently doing any research? And then you can start having a look at the different types of stories that are out there and how you insert yourself differently into those. But yeah, I think Google Alerts is actually quite a good one. I do that for most clients I work with. I'll have certain Google Alerts for different ones, different themes or competitors as well. See what competitors are doing. They
Yeah,
might have something
that
that you thought of. They might have something with something that you probably might have ruled out before because again, you might not have thought it was too relevant or it's a breaking news story that you thought maybe I won't do that and they have. But yeah, that's always a good indication as well. It's good to be nosy, I think. So I do.
yeah, yeah. Going further on this relevancy point, I don't want to belabor it too much, but another thing that I think of when you talk about relevancy, especially when you're pitching local news, is this idea of location. So, for instance, say you're a restaurant chain and you're getting placement in a regional pub. Let's use a UK example. So, like your restaurant chain, you get a placement in a regional pub in Leeds, but your only location is south of London, like where you live. Is
Yeah.
that helpful for the brand?
Again, I think it depends the way you look at it. So the type of content then I think becomes important. So if that publication that leads local is running a story on the best places to visit on city breaks, and London's one of them, then it's going to be relevant, right? Because it's targeting people that are going to be targeting that area or heading to that area. So if there's a relevant link to your location or something that benefits your customer base, then I would say yes, it's still relevant. I also think that it depends on the purpose of the content. So in that instance, that one's looking to target customers directly. But actually, if you're looking at it from a point of view, if you want to get your brand out there, so say you are a new restaurant chain maybe, or you're trying to increase your brand presence and things like that, then actually you want to be coming from a place of expertise. So it could be, I don't know, trying to think off the top of my head here. Say you are an Italian restaurant, right? And it's National Pizza Day, or there's so many awareness for everything at the minute. It could be that you want to get out your top sort of homemade secrets or pizza recipes, or it could be unusual pairings that work really well. Then that's not about trying to target people to come down to your restaurant, but actually, if you're getting pick up in regionals that are based in the north of the country, and nationals are picking that up as well. You're just familiarizing people with your brand and that you know what you're talking about. And I think actually then having people know who you are and you start getting that recognition that actually when they are then find themselves in the south of London, they could, oh, isn't that pizza brand located here? Or I think it's what's the goal, the end goal for your that particular campaign that you're working on. So has your client said it's about customer acquisition and I want more bums on seats, people through the door, then yeah, you're targeting somewhere that's completely out of reach is probably not the best shout. If it's just, I want to widen our visibility online, I want to get people talking about us, I just want our name to be out there as much as Bella Italia's is, then I think any coverage at that point is going to be valuable because it's about spreading awareness as much as you can in different pockets of the media in that case.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think the takeaway for me a lot of the times is like, just keep a good, diverse kind of strategy so that, that the campaigns that you're doing are diverse enough where you're touching all those touch points. You're hitting all those goals that you mentioned. Is it getting bums in seats, as you said, or increasing brand awareness? I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's maybe go through these a little more quickly. So being the first to the punch, that one's an obvious one, but I'd like to know what you can do to prepare to be first to the punch. Like it's a brand new news story. It's going to be tough to prepare for that, but what are some tips?
So I think this very similar to what I was saying before. If there's again certain kind of breaking stories you're trying to target, set up your Google alerts for them. You need to be reading the news. You need to be on it. Set news alerts on your phone for breaking news alerts. Just for BBC News or Sky News, whatever it might be. Those things can be coming through, so you're going to see them there and then. I also think get into the habit of turning around content quickly. Practice, right? You've got to think journalists, they are churning out so many articles a day and they work very reactively. So they're speedy. In those kind of cases, it's be concise, be sharp. You don't necessarily need to give them 3 pages worth of an article. So when those situations arise, if you've got the right skill set in place already, that's going to be so beneficial because you're getting it out there first. So definitely spend time like honing your craft, practicing kind of the way that you write and how much you include when it's breaking news. A breaking news story is going to be packaged up so differently to a feature article. It's a lot more to the point. To get in the habit of writing in that style because that will help when it comes to it.
Yeah, love that. Do you notice a difference in this type of thing in the US? Do you do much pitching in the US versus UK?
Do you know what? Not as much. We started widening our reach in the US, and it's funny because it does vary so much, not only between publication, but I think, like you say, between countries, between markets as well. I think generally, as a rule of thumb, there's certain things that are the same. You need to be quick. You need to be concise. You need to show that you know what you're talking about, basically, in order to get the recognition from the journalist. I would say, whatever market you are trying to target, do your research, do your deep dives, your media audits, see what publications are out there, how they write, the styles that they like, the things that they write about. Having that knowledge of the landscape, the media landscape is going to be so important because actually then you can package up your content in the right way. So it doesn't matter if you don't necessarily target that region, as long as you've done your due diligence to see how it operates, then you can package up your content in the right way to grab their attention.
Yeah, love that. All right. Your fourth key was assert your authority.
Yes.
Again, like an obvious one, it's important to have it, but what does that mean? What are some key points that you should be including in your pitch, let's say?
Yeah. So I think make it clear that you are an expert on your topic. So for instance, if you are an expert and you are coming from a place where you've got a qualification, you're a psychologist, you've done a psychology degree, whatever it may be, include that in there. Call yourself a leading psychologist. If you're an award-winning psychologist, say that you are, or if you're using an expert that is, say that they are. If you're coming from directly on behalf of a brand and you are the managing director, you want to get that in there because they want to know who they're speaking to. You need to assert your authority in a way that clearly shows who you are, your expertise. And I think, especially, it's I think something that's being widely debated, but in the wake of AI, and we're seeing kind of experts coming out that experts that aren't necessarily experts and that are AI generated,
Mhm.
getting a lot of pushback from media at the minute. They want to know that who they are citing is real, basically. So that as much as you can do to show that, I would do, for instance, yeah, if you've got qualifications, you've got titles, use them. I'd even go as far as to say, if you're working with certain experts, include a video of that expert to show who they are, introducing themselves. Hey, I'm blah, blah. I'm a leading psychologist. I do work with this brand. Or if you are doing it from a spokesperson point of view, have a clip of your spokesperson delivering that commentary on camera. So that only not helps reassert your authority, but it also provides media with a visual asset as well. So it gives you credibility. They can see that you are a real person and that it's a true expert, but also they love video assets because as much as we have our own SEO priorities, for their internal SEO purposes, they want to increase their dwell time. They want readers to stay on a page. And if you've got a video included in that helps. So a lot of places now will always include a video in every article, whether it's relevant or not. So if you can provide that video, also a good chance to get in a branded video as well. You can stick your client's logo on it, things like that. Again, for brand visibility, I would definitely incorporate that as well. But show you know what you're talking about through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that tip, the video. That's an idea or a good example of going above and beyond kind
Mm.
of a traditional pitch might do. And yeah, my next question was going to be, how does all this change with the fake authors? And this was maybe 2 months ago, Katie, right? The Reach PLC was it Reach PLC got in trouble? I forget who it was exactly. But anyway, yeah. And so I know a lot of these platforms are trying to crack down on the fake authors, but I love that idea. The video, although I guess you can generate AI videos these days too that look pretty convincing. So
And that's the problem, isn't it? AI is very good. Sometimes it has its mistakes, but it's getting harder and harder to work out what's real and what's not. So I think as long as you are trying to show and you're demonstrating that you are real and it's not AI generated, I think it will go a long way. And I think it actually will be appreciated by who you're targeting as well. So Lee would get in their good books too.
yeah,
Would
yeah.
help.
Yeah, specifically call out, hey, this is why I'm not AI.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, Katie, last question. Be engaging, but concise. You talked a lot about giving people enough information, giving them all the information they need to write these articles. Is there a specific length that you look at? What are some tips for staying concise, but still being engaging?
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly in the case of newsjacking, it's so important to not get lost in the waffle. So almost think of it as an elevator pitch, right? You've got 60 seconds to sell why you need to be a part of this story. What have you got to offer? You're going to take your top lines there. What's the most key things that you need to get across? So I would say with that, it's so important to I always package things up with a headline in the form of what that publication would usually write. Grab their attention straight away, show them that you know that this is going to be relevant to their readership and to their publication. It's on brand. And then quick top line bullet points, key points that they can take away. And then again, if it's depending on the story, it's a couple of paragraphs. Make it really short, sharp. Take the live blogs as an example. So the live blogs really don't take a lot of information and they need things that maybe paragraph at a max, but that's all really concise information. Use that as your starting point. I think you can build out on it, of course, if you're targeting more, you want an article in terms of that coverage converting rather than a blog post. But I would make sure it's definitely shorter than your typical releases, which look more like a feature. Because again, during a breaking news story, journalists don't have the time to sift through it all. They just want to see it right there on the page, which I think is why the headline is such a key tip because it shows them, or they can then visualize what that would look like on site. And straight away, it's going to grab their attention, especially if it's something that's done up in their style. They'll be like, oh, yeah, that works great. And then they start reading more. So without a doubt, grab their attention first with something that's headline worthy and then go from there. But where you can, I would, say no more than a couple of paragraphs, I reckon.
Yeah. Oh, one question I had too, I know I said that was my last one, but I feel like this is maybe important. Do you vet these journalists? Because what I'm getting at is, are there signals that a journalist is going to be more open to a pitch like this, a reactive pitch versus one that might just be writing more general stories. Do you look at like their previous articles to see if they've included experts before? Is that kind of key?
100%. I think as much as you research your publications and your content, you need to research who you're targeting, right? So what type of stories do they typically cover? Is this within their wheelhouse? If it is, then you know that typically they're going to be interested. Again, goes back to look at how they framed stories before. How have they written them? Now, obviously, they have to adhere to a publication style, but you can see the sorts of things that they like including in their pieces, the type of experts that they like using. If it's research, you can see the sort of stats that they're looking for. As much as you do a bit of an audit on the publications, definitely do one on the journalists themselves. And I think the main thing is that you've got to remember they are people at the end of the day. Where you can, try and have a conversation. So sometimes it's not even pitching them a story, it's reaching out and just being like, hey, I've seen that you write a few stories on, I'm going to use the plumbing example again. I've seen you've written a few stories on like bathroom mishaps or horror stories. I actually work on behalf of a plumbing brand. We've got some really good experts in house that could provide great commentary for these. Have you got any planned up? Sorry, have you got any planned in? Would you like us to send some commentary over that you can then mock up into these? If you show that you know what they typically look for and you engage in that conversation, then 9 times out of 10, if it's going to be useful, they will respond to you. Don't get me wrong, we all know that journalist inbox are really busy. So that's when you want to grab their attention in your subject lines and be concise in your emails because they don't have huge amounts of time to shift through things. But I think, yeah, absolutely. If you don't yet have the content, you're building the content and you just want a bit of a direction, it cannot hurt to actually just try and engage in a conversation with the journalists themselves, especially then, because if they are interested, you can start facilitating those exclusive opportunities. Those news stories been great. They think, oh, great. I spoke to that person. They had all these experts on their books. They also said that they could get me exclusive stuff. I'm going to go back to them. And it just ignites that relationship, which I think is so important to maintain in order to get the most out of your coverage. Because as I said, I do think the media are just as important as your clients here because we can't hit publish. They can. You've got to package everything up in the way that not only your client approves and likes, but also how, the journalist is going to want to find it. It's a conversation and just keeping that going 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Let's wrap up there, Katie. I want to make sure people take that last piece of advice and run with it. The idea that your relationships with journalists, you should almost treat them like their clients. I love that so much. It just puts you in the right headspace and forces you to give them the respect and the focus and the effort that is needed. Katie, people can find you best on LinkedIn.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Katie Storey, awesome to have you here. She is the director of at Pressbox PR. And yeah, find her on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, let us know in the comments of this post. Let us know in the comments of the YouTube. Spotify even has comments. Yeah, I'm sure Katie would be more than happy to answer any of this stuff. I do have her deck as well. I'm sure she'd be happy to share some slides if people have any questions. But yeah, I don't know if there's other videos from the Brighton talk anywhere.
So I think the YouTube video of the talk is coming out. It's not until October. So I think it's a couple of weeks before the next conference. So it's not for a little while. But yeah, I don't have the exact date, but they said that it's around that sort of time.
Yeah. I should hold people over until then.
If anyone does want to watch it, they're welcome to. Thank you. So yeah, it'll be interesting to read a bit. But yeah, it will be out just not until a couple of months' time.
Awesome. All right, Katie, thanks again so much. And thanks again for all our listeners.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
all
you
right. Bye, Katie.